Hi there. We're glad you joined us again. We have a wonderful time of questions and answers. Questions and answers that come right down there where you are with your family, with a small group, or just privately, reviewing the book of Acts, learning a few more things maybe, but we're glad to be together, and we're glad you're there too. Yes, indeed. Nancy's here?
Here.
Yeah, she's here. And so is this Dick Ellis. So let's get started in Acts chapter 22. Question number 1. What was the crowd's reaction coming out of the last chapter when he spoke to them? What was the crowd's reaction when Paul spoke Hebrew?
Wow, they wanted to hear what he had to say.
Yeah. Maybe he's worth listening to after all. It's always worthwhile to listen to someone who's helping you with the truth. Next question, what does Paul say to the people?
Well, he gives them his life story, like he's a Jew, and he learned from Gamaliel, and he was zealous for God, and he persecuted the Christians. But then he found out that that was wrong, and he was told about his conversion, and that God had sent him to the Gentiles.
Yes. What a life story in a short while. He was on a mission. What was the crowd's reaction to this?
Well, then they got upset, and they said, "Take him out. He's not fit to live."
My, oh my. How often Paul had to face this. But I'm sure underneath, like we have to know sometimes, that he was doing God's will, and that there was a happiness to let people know what was true and right now. So that was the crowd's reaction. Next question. We don't have a lot of questions on this particular chapter, but let's see what comes up. The commander then sought to examine Paul by scourging him. So what did Paul say?
Well, he says, "Is it lawful to scourge a Roman?"
Uh-oh.
What do you mean? Ew.
What did they say when they learned Paul was a Roman?
Well, they were more careful because he was a Roman. Like
Yeah,
that.
you just don't up and do that to a Roman. What then did the commander say to Paul?
He said, "Are you truly a Roman?"
Yeah. What was Paul's answer?
Well, he says, "I was born a citizen."
Yeah. You know, there's a special attachment, really, here in America. Our soldier boys would never leave a wounded man behind. And even in our own present time, we have gone in to some other countries who were hostilely holding our people and brought them out. So it's important to be a citizen in a country that cares. I was born a citizen. Were they afraid to mishandle Paul now?
Oh, yeah, it made a difference.
Yes, indeed. But in the midst of all this, as Paul defended himself, here in chapter 22, he did explain at length his conversion and why he's doing what he's doing at this time and what they're calling him in question over. So Paul went through his defense here and explains how he was on the road to Damascus and a light shined around him. He fell to the ground, and you remember all that conversation. "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And Paul said, "Well, what's going on here?" Well, when you persecute God's people, you're persecuting me. So Paul was blind there just before Damascus, and he was told that somebody, you go into Damascus and it'll be told you what to do. So we start there with verse 12. And one Ananias, a devout man according to the law, having a good report of all the Jews which dwelled there, came to him. Paul's narrating this. And stood and said to me, Brother Saul, receive thy sight. In the same hour I looked upon him. Now here's this message again that we discovered earlier when Paul made his defense. That there is a message. It has to be heard. And it has to be followed and obeyed. So this is going to be true with Paul. And so he received his sight, and verse 14 says, and he said, the God of our fathers hath chosen thee, that thou shouldest know his will, and see that just one, and shouldest hear the voice of his mouth. Now I underline the word see. You want to know why? That was one of the qualifications to be an apostle. If you read back in Acts 1, when they chose Matthias, it gives us the qualifications of the apostles. And one thing they had to do, they had to see Jesus. And that's exactly what happened. Even Jesus was true in fulfilling the qualifications of a true apostle by letting Paul see him. Probably helped him be blind. But anyway, Jesus qualified Paul to be an apostle by letting him see him. And there's no one on earth today that has literally seen Jesus to be an apostle. But anyway, verse 15, for thou shalt be his witness unto all men of what thou hast seen and heard. And this is what Ananias is telling him. Saul, and now why tarriest thou? You can see now, so you got to do something now. Arise, be baptized. Does that mean that baptism has nothing to do with what's important? Doesn't sound like it, does it? Arise and do something, baptized. And what will that accomplish? And wash away your sins. That's what the book says. Calling on the name of the Lord. Now, you know, some people say this calling is nothing but prayer. So you are to pray or call upon the Lord before you're baptized. But that's not what happens here. It means more than one thing. It means that calling on the name of the Lord is more than prayer. And if you follow this phrasing through Old Testament times, clear back in Genesis, it was more than prayer. It was more involving our reliance upon God and our devotion to God. It covered the whole picture of godly obedience. So Paul was godly obeying, and it was so described by saying, calling on the name of the Lord. After all, we are baptized in the name of the Lord. So this becomes a very important verse for our spiritual understanding and a teaching on how a person can be saved and must be saved. And Paul explains it here. So they were afraid to mishandle Paul, and they took a carefulness about this. So I have one more question here out of chapter 22. What happened the very next day after this?
Well, the commander got together with a meeting of the chief priests and their council, And they had it with Paul to learn why he was accused.
Yeah.
They thought they'd better find out what's going on.
Yeah, they figured they better look into this and pursue it a little bit more intricately, lest they get themselves in trouble. And I think that's true with the Bible. Let's all look into the Bible a little more intricately. How about that? Mind the P's and Q's of the Scriptures and come up with some of the exacts. And one of these things that we can do is to not jump to a conclusion out of one verse, like just John 3:16, and try to make a home run with that when there's other verses that tell us a more conclusive conclusion to what we should do in order to become a child of God, or any other part of the Christian way. So we've learned a lot of things in this short lesson. Help someone else to learn the same. You might share this video with somebody else among your friends and let them experience the same thing that you just experienced in this tonight. So thank you for listening and being with us. It was our pleasure to be with you to learn a little bit more about God's will for our lives. How about that? I like it. Bye.